didn't realize how much was impacting me and how powerless I felt because of voices in my head that came from somewhere else. And I spend so much time, I'm always telling one of my friends, like, we need to go to a rage room. Like, I need to get this anger out. And there was one point in the book too, where it's like, instead of being angry, like, realize that the people who said these things to you, did these things to you, right? Like, they did the best they can with what they knew, with what they had. And trying to learn to let go of those voices that made me feel like I was wrong, that made me feel like I should be more grateful and I can't feel what I'm feeling, that it's wrong to be excited about good things and to have energy, right? And to not kind of just shy away in the background for other people.
Welcome to Normalize the Conversation by Inspiring My Generation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicheter. Today, I'm joined by David Cooley and Jessica Fern, co-authors of Transforming the Shame Triangle. Today, we're talking about shame, how it shapes our relationships, our self-talk, and the way we respond to conflict. We unpack why emotions so often feel wrong, how our inner critic keeps us stuck, and what it looks like to move towards self-compassion in real practical ways. If you've ever felt like you were too much or not enough, join us in this conversation. You're not alone in this.
David, Jessica, thank you both so much for joining me. I am really excited for our conversation. But before we begin, I want to check in. How are you really?
Why don't you go, Jess, first?
I'm good. I'm a mix. On one level, I do feel really good. I just had a great session actually with a couple that a year ago I would have said, this is a really hard session. And today it was like, wow, it's actually enjoyable to be with them because there's been so much growth. But we are having most of the country's about to have this big ice snowstorm, and our area specifically is supposed to have power outages. So that's in the back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stressful with the snow. I've never even seen snow. Like, as a snowstorm. Interrupt you.
Yeah. We'll see. Sometimes they predict things and they don't
It
come as
changes.
intense.
Yeah,
It changes. It could be worse. It could be better. We'll
right.
see. So some uncertainty there. In terms of how I'm doing, I think mixed too. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation. I love talking about the book, and I love conversational style of getting into the content. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is the last few days I've been paying a lot of attention, more attention than recent times, to what's happening at the world stage. And so I'm feeling a lot of internal turmoil around that, to be honest. It's sort of this background anxiety, frustration. There's just a lot of intense emotions that are coming up for me around several of the things that feel like are impacting our world. And so I can feel some of my shame triangle parts getting active around that. So it's been interesting to work with that material and still feel functional, and still be able to show up to conversations, show up to sessions, show up to parenthood, with that running in the background. So it's, it's something just I'll name for transparency, because we're inviting that kind of vulnerability here.
Yeah, it's real.
Thank you for sharing. I think a lot of people right now are really being affected by everything that's happening in the world and don't know how to kind of cope with it, because there's so much every day. We see more videos, we see more headlines, and a lot of us feel so powerless. Like, can we do anything to make this better? How are we in the situation that we're in? And a lot of us are stuck in the cycle of just feeling, like I said, so powerless and feeling like I should be so grateful. At least that's for me. When I'm starting to feel down, I feel like I should be so grateful for not being in these situations that so many people are in. How could I be feeling depressed? How could I be feeling upset when it's so much worse for so many people? And then I just get stuck in, like you said, like that shame triangle.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that question of powerlessness is one of the reasons why we wanted to write this book, is because in terms of our own lived experience, that's the place where we have a profound opportunity to exercise more choice, more agency. And so for me, it's tragic that we don't, right, given that it's possible. And so I think this book really unravels a lot of the reasons why we feel powerless or get stuck in feeling like we don't have access to meaningful decisions, especially when big things are happening. So for me, it's a ripe time to talk about this material, right, which is very intrapersonal, very immediate, while the backdrop of big international world stage things are happening.
Reading through the book, I didn't realize how much was impacting me and how powerless I felt because of voices in my head that came from somewhere else. And I spend so much time, I'm always telling one of my friends, like, we need to go to a rage room. Like, I need to get this anger out. And there was one point in the book, too, where it's like, instead of being angry, like, realize that the people who said these things to you, did these things to you, right? Like, they did the best they can with what they knew, with what they had. And trying to learn to let go of those voices that made me feel like I was wrong, that made me feel like I should be more grateful and I can't feel what I'm feeling, that it's wrong to be excited about good things and to have energy, right? And to not kind of just shy away in the background for other people. I didn't realize like how much anger I was holding on toward this instead of being able to really understand where it was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jess, you look like you're on the verge of saying something more.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing to many things that I think we could go in several directions. But a lot of us understand like the shame that we're not supposed to feel certain things. And usually we think those are like the hard or bad, quote unquote, bad things. But you're also talking about the shame that we have about feeling good things, about being, whether it's grateful or excited or happy. And like, we're also not supposed to feel that. So we wind up getting so boxed in that like in the full spectrum of the human emotional experience, we're just allowed to have this very tight, narrow version of that. Yeah. And then when we realize it, bursts of those feelings can actually start coming out. And a lot of that can actually be anger.
Yeah. Those good feelings, I didn't know that I was allowed to be excited about things and talk about it and share it. Like, I think it was yesterday, I texted one of my friends and I was like, I'm so sorry to annoy you, but something like good happened and I'm so excited and I want to tell someone. And I went straight to, oh, that's annoying because I shouldn't brag and be excited about something. I should just keep that to myself. So I didn't realize, like, in everything, the good emotions and the bad emotions, not always allowing ourselves, like you said, to feel that full spectrum.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're doing in this work is really trying to change the way that we talk about emotions. And so in this case, the full spectrum, each end of the extreme, there is no good emotion or bad emotion, right? And so there might be challenging emotions that feel uncomfortable to be with, but we wouldn't call them bad, and we wouldn't call the other side good per se, right? It's just what have we been socialized, really, to feel or feel acceptable in terms of our own feelings. You know, one of the lived experiences that I have in terms of, I'm really relating to what you're saying of the challenge of celebrating something in life. You know, something I grew up with, you know, it was really hard for my mother to celebrate things and just take the good for what it was or the positive for what it was. And I remember phone calls where I'm calling my mom as an adult saying, hey, I just got this new job. It's a big deal. And, you know, I've been hoping for something like this. It's a real breakthrough, kind of revolutionary in terms of what it represents, in terms of new horizons and opportunities. And the first response was, oh, but are you going to make enough money? You know, and so that was her concern. She was worried about me. You know, I understand where it comes from. It was a protective part of her that wants to make sure that all my needs are met. And how sweet is that? And yet the lived experience that I can remember decades and decades of is that this is the first response to something that for me is really exciting. And so I recognize within myself, I've got my own internalized version now of this dampening part, right? That's if things are too good, we got to look for what could go wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And what that really does is protect me from disappointment and other things, but it also stops me from really connecting to that joy or celebratory energy.
It's making me think of like an originating experience. I must have been, I don't know, 10 years old or even younger, but in that range, like 8, 9, 10. And my dad and I, who at that point I only saw every once in a while, we went to the 7-Eleven to get stuff for the rest of the family. And I got a scratch off and I won. I think I won like $5. And I was so excited. I don't think I'd ever done a scratch off, didn't win $5 before. And my first response was, let's go back and get more scratch cards. And it could have been a potent lesson, but his first response was, that's addiction. And it shut it down, right? It wasn't like, yay, you're happy, let's go. What about if we get your $5? Or, do you want to risk your $5? There was no conversation like that. It was just this shutdown. Yeah. And, it's subtle and overt all at once. And then I could see, oh yeah, through the years, I learned like, don't express that level of excitement or kind of unfiltered yay, because it's going to get a harsh response. And then it feels even more vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we don't realize how these experiences that may seem so small are so big and meaningful.
Exactly.
Right? Like listening to both of you, I get excited by everything. I have such a bubbly personality. And whenever something small happens, I always go straight to my parents, like, guess what happened today? And it could be something as small as like, I got buffalo cauliflower. So I'm just very excited about everything. But when I do something work-wise, like I complete a workbook or I make a small curriculum sale, it's straight to, well, how much money are you making? Kind of like that. Is this something that's sustainable?
Yeah.
It makes it so hard to get to enjoy those moments. I then go straight into, okay, well, I need to do more. I need to write more, create more, produce more, sell more, instead of giving myself even a chance to experience and enjoy it, which feels so sad because I have this like I love being excited about things. It makes me really happy. I'm a person who will have like a Taylor Swift dance party every day just to be excited about something. And people's small messages, things that they say, take so much of that away without even realizing it.
Right. And I'd imagine that gets internalized as a version of shame that says, oh, I'm too much. My excitement's too much. Right. The message is your excitement's too much, and then it can go further into you're too much. Does that connect?
Yes, actually. So after reading the book, I wrote, I'm not too much on my mirror, because that's what came up for me. It's like when I'm upset and I'm feeling more depressed, people be like, you need to get over it. Like, this is too much to deal with. Right. And then when I'm really happy and excited, it's too much. And people commonly say, like, you just need a baseline. Like, you need a middle. You're too much up and down. And it makes it so hard to like express anything that I feel to other people, and to feel like I'm wrong all the time just for a spectrum of emotions that I have.
Right. And then do you beat yourself up that way too now? Like, has it internalized as your own inner critic?
Yes, exactly. I get straight to when I'm feeling down, like, it's wrong with me for feeling down. I have so much. I should be happier, more excited. I should have all the tools I need to be able to get through this. How is this happening again? Right? So on that side, and then when things are good and I feel excited, like, well, you should work harder. this isn't enough for you to be excited about. So it's like back and forth of this cycle that I'm always wrong.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, it's a really pernicious cycle. And so I'm curious if in reading the book you found, I don't know, a new way to talk or think about those particular internalized voices. You know, like, does it feel like things loosened up, or that there's more acceptance for this larger spectrum of your own lived experience that previously felt more monitored or controlled by these internalized sort of versions of other people's projections?
Yeah, well, when reading the book, it was the first time I realized how much I'm internalizing this idea that I'm too much. I didn't realize that that's the thought I was having, right? I just kind of lived in this spectrum of, if I'm excited, it's bad. If I'm sad, it's bad, right? And it's never okay. And when I realized I'm telling myself I'm too much, I'm wrong, and then I'm turning that into I'm not good enough, I'm not enough, I'm a problem. Like, I'm going through all these thoughts that are coming up, and I liked how you switched inner critic to inner coach. And I was like, what would I want? Like, I was a cheerleader. What would I want my cheer coach to say? Right? I'd want to say, like, you're growing, you're working, you're learning, right? Just even if I can't go straight to, no, you're not too much, you are enough. If I can't get my brain to believe that right away, like this idea that I'm learning, I'm growing, this encouragement, it really has made a difference. Like, I'm actually writing messages on my mirror and on sticky notes around my apartment.
Well, I think in some ways you're actually doing exactly what we're advocating for, you know, because one of the things that we're saying is we're not advocating that people just push against the message, the direct message or the reasoning or the logic of something like the inner critic, right? Where you try to sort of wrestle your truth from it by saying, that's not what it is, right? It's kind of like arguing with a drunk person or a small child, where it's, you know, it's like you can't change a part's opinion by pushing against it. And so what we really are trying to do is change the voice, right? Let the inner critic know that, yeah, you're looking out for me. It's just the way that you're doing it, it's not effective. And so I can actually take care of myself by embracing this experience that I'm having, right? And turn myself, that voice, into an inner coach. So it sounds like you've actually done exactly what we're advocating for, which is really sweet to hear.
Yeah, I really liked something that was actually very difficult for me, that took a lot of time and work to do, was having a conversation with the part, really being able to try to externalize it.
Yeah.
That was really difficult. And when I was reading it, I was like, that sounds like an easy exercise. It's so hard.
What was hard about it?
I was so deep in this is who I am.
Yes.
That it's so hard to externalize and see, like, this doesn't have to be all of me. This is a part that I'm working with, and being able to separate it. I was like fighting myself and resisting it for a while. It took me a couple days to be able to, like, catch my breath and start to see, like, okay, maybe this is not all of me. And it took a while.
Yeah. It's pretty mind-blowing though, huh? Like, and this is sort of kind of the tragedy that happens for so many of us, is there is a aspect or a part of us and we confuse it for the whole of us. And then, like, fuse our entire identity with this one sliver of who we are. Yeah, so just that exercise, even just imagining, what if this part, you know, was in the corner of the room? Like, just that, creating some distance in our imagination can start to create all of this choice that maybe wasn't there before.
Yeah, one of the things that's been really helpful with this concept is helping people start to nuance what are the other facets of their lived experience that become active when a part is active, right? Because a lot of times when a part is active, our literal brain chemistry changes, our physiology changes, the nervous system starts to register everything potentially as a threat, right? And so if we're going into a fight or flight response to something that we're thinking about ourselves, we're changing in some really tangible and profound ways that really distorts our thinking. And so in a moment of dysregulation that's fueled by an activated part, you could say something like, I don't even care about X, Y, and Z, something that normally is really important to you. In a moment of dysregulation, you can condemn or just push away. And someone could hear you say that and they're thinking, but you love this. This is something that you always loved. How can you be saying this? And so understanding parts, right, and their extreme expressions and moments where we're really changing in response to that kind of influence that they have over us helps us start to not feel so identified with those extreme statements or declarations. Right? I can say something intense and know that it's not representative of my big T truth. Right? It's a part saying something in a moment where I'm not feeling my best. And that creates a lot more opportunity to depersonalize those intense moments instead of feeling like, what's wrong with me that I'm saying these things, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to hear more how it was once you did externalize the critic. What happened?
I realized so it's the nervous system reactions, right? I'm someone who, as soon as I think I'm the problem, that I'm wrong, I did something wrong, that I internalize it as I did something wrong, I completely shut down.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not even there as I'm trying to, like, I guess, protect myself. And I didn't realize that's what it was. So I was like, something's wrong with me that I do this. I need to get over it. And as I was trying to have that conversation with my part, I realized I'm just trying to protect myself because I'm afraid of the other person's reaction and what's going to happen. And I'm afraid of the consequences. So if I'm not there and engaging, then nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
Didn't realize it's keeping me from ever advocating for myself, forever wanting to take up space. Then go into, well, I just need to do what they want and make them happy. So it's really interesting how little I prioritized myself as someone who matters in any situation and context as soon as I'm a little anxious about being too much.
Yeah, and I think you're exemplifying in a good way too, that like we jump from different parts. So there's that deflated or frozen part that's like not speaking up. And then it sounds like you're going almost into like an appeased nervous system response that's trying to people please and like make it okay. And yeah, feel anxious, but hypervigilant about the other.
Yeah. And it was so fascinating because a couple weeks ago, I was at my friend's house and she was saying something and I was like pushing back on it. And then she had like some kind of epiphany and said it out loud, her thought. And it was more aggressive, but it wasn't directed at me. It was like, oh, I didn't think about this. But I took it as she yelled at me and I completely shut down. And then after that, anytime something good happened for me, I would like tell her, but then I would switch it to, but look how amazing you are and what's happening with you. And like not even allowing myself to take up space in that, or straight to what can I do to support you? How can I help you? And never allowing myself to also exist in the context and the friendship. It's now all about how that person's feeling and doing instead of me at all.
Yeah. I think what you're highlighting there is the way that what we would call an escaper exercises a strategy, right, to avoid going into that painful experience of, in this case, collapsing or disassociating from your own lived experience, right? So I don't want to go there, right? So I'm going to make sure that she's okay. So I'm going to people please here. And so we're going to externalize, make sure that person is okay and not getting dysregulated so we don't have to experience our own dysregulation in response. And I think you're highlighting something that's really, really common, but really confusing and hard to work through if we don't see it for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. It was so confusing as I was reading about it. It's like I never realized why I responded this way. And I felt, again, like the shame of I'm wrong. Something is wrong with me. And I guess, so we've used the word inner critic, we use the word escaper, and that with shame makes the shame triangle. Can you kind of define a little bit more of what those pieces are for people who are listening and have not yet read the book?
Yeah. Yeah, just a high level view for the listeners. Imagine a triangle pointed down, and this is a constellation of inner parts. And so on the upper left is the inner critic. That's the voice that's beating us up. And like we've already said, it's speaking in that, like, what's wrong with you? How could you? You shouldn't. You should. And then that voice is sort of targeting on the bottom is shame, which is the part of us or parts of us that hear the inner critic and believe it and go, oh, it's true. There is something wrong with me. I should get over it. I am broken. I am too much. I'm not enough. And so what we're saying is those two parts are pretty intense. That's a very intense dynamic to have internally. And so in some ways, thankfully, the upper right of the triangle is our system, like, tries to divert this and has these escaper parts that are trying to not hear that inner critic, not give it any more fuel, and not feel the shame. And so we can do that in many ways. We can escape through overfunctioning and perfectionism and overachieving, or people pleasing, appeasing, or we can underfunction where we're kind of just zoning out and numbing out or dissociating. Or we can escape through other feelings that are actually easier than shame. And you can ask about that if we want to. And then, we also can escape through just becoming critical and projecting it all outward. It's easier to just, criticize other people than to feel our own inner critic beating us up.
Is that why people say, like, hurt people hurt people?
Yeah, I think so. It's a big part of it, right? Someone who's not, like, that would be one of the things that happens in this. So the book, we're really walking people through their own transformation of your inner critic is going to change into a different voice that's more of an inner coach. Your shame isn't going to be this layer on top of your feelings. You're just going to be able to hold your feelings, whatever they are. And your escapers, instead of turning away, they're turning towards. But when we do that, wow, we're much kinder and more accepting towards others as well, because we're not having our own internal turmoil taking up so much room.
Yeah. And one of the things I think that you're saying, right, Fran, is that hurt people hurt others, right? And that's one of the biggest, in terms of interpersonal relationship impacts of the shame triangle, is it really makes it hard for us to hear and hold space for other people's hurt when they say that we've impacted them with our own behavior. So if I come to you and I say, right, you've hurt me with something that you've said or did, and you feel a lot of shame about it, it's going to be next to impossible for you to really take accountability or acknowledge my experience, because that shame is too painful. Because the shame is convincing you that because you did something that had a negative impact on me, that means there's something fundamentally wrong with you in essence. And your parts are going to have to keep you from really taking that message in. And I think one of the things that we're socialized to do is to then make the other person now wrong for trying to make us feel bad about ourselves, when maybe in truth they were just trying to give us feedback about our actions. So we see that the shame triangle can be a really insidious, a really challenging obstacle to relational repair. And so if we don't know how to work with our own shame, it can be really, really hard to repair with other people when emotional hurt comes into play.
So is our, like, defensiveness coming from shame?
A lot of times, yes.
Yes.
I would say yes. The overwhelming majority, I think there's some facet or element of shame that's coming into play, and unfortunately not being named or recognized for what it is. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, because, yeah, if I feel this idea that someone thinks I was wrong, right, I might dissociate and shut down. Or, like, if it's my brother, for example, I don't shut down, right? I go straight.
You fight back.
I fight back.
Yeah.
Don't know why, I guess. Sorry, Rocco, if you're listening. Probably not. But if you are, sorry. I go straight to, like, no, I didn't. You were making this up. You're being dramatic. And totally invalidating his experience completely, because I can't be the one in the wrong. And
right. You're trying to prove you're not wrong with that defensiveness.
Yeah, and I think what we're saying is, who are you actually trying to prove you're not wrong to? And often it's a part of you, right, that doesn't want to believe that something's wrong with you, right? So that idea of wrongdoing in and of itself is interesting to examine, and we look at that through the lens of the adversarial paradigm, and that's something that we talk about in the book, right? We've been socialized, at least here in the United States, with a way of thinking about conflict that sets us up to make it worse. And we usually pit people that make us feel uncomfortable emotionally as adversaries, even though they're people that we love deeply. And I would suggest potentially that you are able to get fiery and maybe have some fight back with your brother because you feel safe enough to do that. You're not worried about losing the relationship, whereas maybe with someone else you are. And so there's more of a tendency to shut down and not go into fight or flight per se, and maybe go into more of a dorsal response because something about it doesn't feel safe enough.
So true. I feel safe to kind of fight back because I know that it's just going to be between me and him back and forth. It's just words that we'll get over in 5 minutes. Granted, there are never very mean words, which is why we get over it pretty quickly. Which one of us is wrong and who's dramatic. But I didn't realize until reading the book that it impacts my relationships with other people, how I feel about myself and what I'm going through and experiencing. And I hear people say things like, you can't love others so you love yourself, like all the time. And don't know if I fully believe that, but I do realize that how I treat myself and what I'm saying to myself impacts how I interact with the world around me, how I see people, view people, and want to engage with them or not engage with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I also don't love that idea that we can't love others until we love ourselves. It actually doesn't make sense biologically. Like, babies learn to love through being loved, not through just loving their parents first. So there is sort of an order of operation. But yes, as adults, there is a process we usually need to go into of learning to love ourselves. And really, it's more learning to accept ourselves. And then we do have more capacity to be accepting and loving towards others. But there's so many people that are absolutely loving and yet have a lot of this inner critic and shame within themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that sense, when we're talking about loving ourselves or accepting ourselves, we're talking about loving and accepting very specific parts of ourselves.
Right.
And so can we love painful parts? Can we love parts that really flare up and maybe do wild things? Maybe are responsible for specific behaviors that we're still feeling shame about. Right? Instead of trying to fight those down, get rid of them, make them different, quote unquote, fix them as if they were problems, can we actually love them? Can we hold space for them? Can there be compassion? Can there be understanding for their motivations that are really adaptive strategies to situations that when we were younger, we didn't know how to resolve differently or handle differently. But now that we're older, we have more resources, more skills, more capacity. So it can be a really profound work, this inner parts work of reparenting ourselves and working towards what you're saying in terms of what does it mean to love ourselves in a very practical way, not because that's the only way that we can love others, but because it's an important facet of that dynamic.
I really liked how the shame triangle turned into like the self-love triangle, right? When you learn to I was sitting there. One part that came up for me was I'm very ambitious. I started my nonprofit as a blog when I was 12. I knew exactly what I was going to do, how I was going to do it, and that's what it was going to be. And there was no stopping me. And I am always told, like, that's not the route you should take, right? Like, you shouldn't go into entrepreneurship and nonprofit. You should get like a real job first. You shouldn't have these big goals. You're not going to reach them. Right. So it's like all these things that are wrong. And I started to think I was wrong for being ambitious and being like embarrassed about being bold, going after what I want and saying it to other people. Right. If someone asks me, like, what do you want to do? A lot of times I say, I don't know. And if someone asks me, what do you do? I don't really do anything. Right. Like, I would just sit there and completely invalidate things that I know what I do. I love what I do. I totally believe in my big, silly dreams, and maybe it'll come true. Hopefully, who knows? But I didn't realize how much I was not liking that about myself. And as I was sitting there and trying to externalize it, I started to get more love again for that about me. It was kind of silly, but I don't think it's silly. Everyone around me thinks it's silly. So like my personal like FR, I had it printed on a notebook, a coffee mug, a hat, a t-shirt, like a sweatshirt, just to the point of me wearing it and seeing it all the time and being like, okay, I believe in this. This is okay to see and to love and to accept. It doesn't have to be something that I like hide. And it was amazing the difference in how I felt about myself as I started to switch to love from shame.
Yes. Yeah. I feel really, I don't know, that I'm moved to hear maybe how much criticism you received from others, and that it, even though you were then concealing it, it didn't actually take away your dream and your desire. And that's pretty incredible. Like somehow that got preserved, because so many people do, like they get the criticism or you shouldn't. And, you know, who do you think you are? And then they do give up on their dreams. So yeah, I'm curious, like, how did that stay intact inside of you?
I really don't know. I decided like 12 years old, this is what I was going to do. So the story goes, I wasn't allowed to watch anything on TV unless my mom unblocked it. And so I was allowed to watch like 3 shows with her. One of them was General Hospital, and she'd record it and she'd have like a 15-minute window afterwards, just in case there was some kind of news interruption that made it go longer. And so right after General Hospital was Oprah. So I watched like
the first few minutes of Oprah.
And I was like, that's who I'm going to be. And it's in my high school transcript, like file, going to be Oprah Winfrey. Right. So it was the only thing I ever saw for myself. So even when everyone was telling me like, it's not going to happen, you're not going to be able to do this, why are you trying to do anything that's like self-help or helping others? I just stopped talking about it to other people, but I was like, I'm totally going to prove everyone wrong. I got this. But it was the only influence I really saw was, this is what I'm going to be. That's it. Mine made up, 12 years old.
Wow.
And I'm very stubborn.
It sounds like a good stubborn in that regard.
Yeah.
Well, it also makes me think about, research that you've done, Jessica, where, you've explored people doing extraordinary things in extraordinary circumstances. And what is it that allows people to stay true to things that feel really deeply ingrained in them? And one of the things I remember that you found, which I think is very true and can identify in myself, is when we have a sense of goal that's really fused with our sense of self. Like when we identify, it's not only something I do, this is who I am. I think it's harder to squish or squelch, kind of get rid of or suppress those things. Like there's more resilience, more perseverance. And it sounds like there was such an identity piece for you around this vision that you had for yourself. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it was, this is what I'm going to do. I think on my original blog at 12, I was like, I'm going to change the world. That was who I was going to be. And no matter how sad or alone or judged or invalidated that I felt, I was like, I am going to be what makes the difference. No one else is going to feel this way. I'm going to change it. And I just that was all I was going to be. If I didn't do anything else, I was going to make sure that another 12-year-old didn't feel as alone as I felt.
It's powerful.
Yeah. It's a lot of determination.
Very determined.
Yeah.
So as you're reading through this book, for someone who maybe is listening, is like, I don't have any awareness of these different, where like my inner critic came from, right? Like I have the voices in my head, I'm aware of them, but I don't know where they stemmed from. What maybe like advice do you have to begin to really explore the origin of these messages?
Yeah, I would say you can start by even just writing down, like, what are the top 10 phrases, usually not more than that, that your inner critic is even saying. And then go one by one and say, where did I hear these? And sometimes our inner critic will actually literally sound like the voice of someone else in our life. So that could be a way, like, does this sound like someone else's voice? Or sometimes it does sound like our own, or just like a voice we don't even know. but we can then place like, yeah, that's true. Grandma said that, or dad or mom said that, or brother said that. You can start placing it in your actual history. However, sometimes that's not the case. You really were very fortunate. You grew up in a family that didn't do criticism or shaming or blaming. It happens, right? And so start looking broader. What happened when you were in school and you were interfacing with hormones in adolescence or mean girl culture, bullying, right? What happened? What were the messages on television? What were the commercials saying about what your sex or gender was supposed to be like? Or the color of your skin, or what your religion is, like all of those things, there's these, what's called like structural violence, that the larger power structures tell us what's okay about who we are and what's not. And whether we realize it consciously, it's like it has impacted us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's social narratives that we all have internalized, whether we realize it or not, depending on the culture or society we grew up in. One of the things that I think you mentioned earlier was this struggling to feel okay about things when you're not productive, and like productivity is such a cultural, it's so specific to our cultural ethos, right? And so for people growing up in the United States, it's very, very difficult to imagine a world where productivity doesn't equal self-worth. So it's been interesting for me to live in other places outside the United States and see cultures that aren't as steeped in that, where people aren't carrying that same burden internally. Just the narrative of productivity, right? And yet if you start to look at social media and shows and sort of the big cultural messaging on so many different levels for us on a daily basis is your self-worth equals the degree to which you produce, right? Or economically successful. So that's one of the things that we're helping people try to see in the book is just what are some of the big social or cultural narratives that are guiding a lot of our feeling of self.
Yeah. So another way to think of it too is take that exact line your inner critic says and say, what social norm does this connect to? I know, oh, my inner critic's telling me I'm supposed to have kids by now or supposed to be married. Well, that's interesting, right? Where that's a social norm at play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't realize was how much the shows that I'm watching, that the content I'm scrolling on mindlessly on Instagram is impacting me. How much it's making me think about where I should be and what I'm doing wrong. There was this one account that I was following that was very much, there was one post like, well, I don't stop to celebrate this. I keep going, right? I don't rest. Like these team no sleeps. And I always joke team no sleep. I'm like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Just the accounts that I'm following are impacting how I view the world and my self-worth and where it comes from. And it's so funny you talk about productivity because that was the thing that came up for me. And I started trying to write from that part's point of view because I couldn't really understand why I was feeling this way. It was like, I know that it's about being content, not how much content you produce. Heard that a million times. Yet I couldn't understand where this part was coming from. And as I was writing through it, my handwriting literally changed into my dad's very much like productivity, keep going, keep working. And he's done very well by doing that. So like props to him. Amazing. But the messaging that I received as a kid was him stomping through the house in like motorcycle leather boots at 5 a.m. Like get up, the day started. The only advantage you have over other people is the hours they're asleep. Right. So that was the messaging I took in. And anytime I slept in a little bit later than this, before the sun, like the sun rose before I got up, I felt like I was wrong if I slept
lazy.
5 a.m. Right. Like I'm not being productive enough. I gave up time. Now other people are going to get ahead of me. Right. So as I was writing from that part and these messages were coming up, my handwriting shifted into his handwriting. And that was the first time I realized like, oh, when I was a child and him like stomping through the house, like get up at 5, trying to teach me to be like an early riser and to start my day early. What I took from it was if you don't, you are wrong. You are not good enough. You are purposely being lazy to not achieve enough. And it's going to be your fault anytime someone achieves something before you because you chose to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Intense.
Whenever I talk to him about it, I'm like, why the leather boots? Why? That was such an aggressive way to wake me up. And my brother slept right through it. He did not care. Me, I was like, I'm up, let's go. Making coffee at 12 years old, trying to get excited for the day. I didn't realize how much, and it's so funny because my brother took it the exact opposite. My brother's like, I'm going to sleep. I'm going to get my sleep. I don't care about anything else. Versus I went straight to, I'm totally wrong and I'm bad if I don't prioritize productivity.
Yeah, that's a great example of the same message literally stomping through your house, yet it can be experienced so differently, depending on the child.
Yeah. So my brother sees it as if I don't get enough sleep, I'm wrong, I'm bad, right? Like I should prioritize like my self-care, my rest, because otherwise I'm not going to feel good. And then I did it to myself. So he sees it as if I don't give myself the rest, I'm not going to feel good. I did this to myself versus I see it as I slept too much. I am not going to be good enough. People are going to be better than me. I did this to myself. So we kind of took the same thing and created different types of shame attached to it.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's still shame and just different ways of coping with it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
It is.
Yeah, a lot to learn.
Reading through it helps me understand him more too. So I guess the relational part, right, is really understanding how our experiences completely shaped who we are in different ways. Like my escaper versus his escaper were very different. And being able to recognize that, I think it's allowed me to communicate a little better with him and not see it as like him telling me I need to change and me telling him he needs to change, and recognizing like this is a part of who we are. And maybe we can learn from each other a little bit more about, I can learn to rest and self-care, and he can learn that it's okay if he wants to wake up a little bit earlier or stay up a little later. He's not wrong for not getting 10 hours of sleep. If he gets 8 or 9, it's okay.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. That's something that we're often trying to do in the work with people, and to teach, how to express needs in a way that aren't making projections about who you are as a person fundamentally, right? And so taking care of yourself doesn't have to be statements about your truth essentially as a person versus these are the needs of the moment. And how do I tend to my feelings and needs in a way that feels organic, aligned, authentic, right? Without making sweeping statements or generalizations about who we are as people fundamentally. And that can be hard to do because I think we're socialized to sort of conflate those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't realize how much is really impacting us and where it's coming from. And I just really appreciated the opportunity to get to learn more about myself in a way that wasn't, it was a little tough and scary in the beginning because like I try and externalize it. Like I said, it took me days to really stop resisting it. So it's not like, oh, this was super quick and easy, but it really gave me a chance. It's broken down so like beautifully with questions you can ask, right? So it's like a real guide. So I really appreciate that. So for people listening, as we're wrapping up, can you give a quick overview of what these key takeaways you're going to get from this book, a quick elevator pitch to let people know what's coming for them by reading it?
You want to say first, Dave? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think, like we've highlighted in the context of this conversation, there's a lot of self-awareness that can come about some pretty subtle internal facets of our own experience. Right, we're learning how to look at different aspects of our lived experience that are expressed through what we're calling the shame triangle parts. So for a lot of people that haven't done this work, that in and of itself can be a really revolutionary experience where you start to recognize the voice of these parts that have caused a lot of challenge or disrupted, right? The feeling that you can just be who you are as you are without needing to fix or change yourself in some fundamental way. So that's really the first part, is introducing people to the dynamics that are set in motion by the shame triangle. After that, and one of the key ways that happens is we're helping people connect to this concept that's called self with a big S, which is really the perspective or the place within us that can hold all of these parts with compassion and care. So instead of trying to get rid of these parts, right, and do away with them or fix them as if they were problems, we're learning how to hold a new kind of space for them, staying grounded in self, right? And self is this compassionate, wise, very spacious presence that doesn't try to make anything be different than what it is. It just allows us to really sit with what is. And I'll turn it over to you, Jess, to finish that picture.
Yeah. And so with that new relationship to this inner resource of capital S self, this true transformation happens. So, people most likely listening can identify with the different inner critic and shame and escaper parts. And it's a big promise, but I think we follow through with like, you will feel different at the end, and not just different, but actually transformed, where these parts are no longer functioning in that really harsh way. But there's an inner system that feels so much better and allows much more resilience and flexibility in your life overall and with yourself.
It is truly an incredible book. And so for those listening, I don't know if we even said the title this entire time.
Right?
From Shame to Love, Using Parts Work. Thank you so much for creating this book, this resources guide, and for joining me today. I really appreciate you both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really sweet to meet you and have a chance to get to know you just a little bit and hear some of your story. Thank you for revealing so much with us.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.